So let's now look at her running economy. Okay, so I told you already that her running economy back in 1992 wasn't all that special. It was around 205 mils per kilogram per kilometre. A couple of years later, it's down to 195. A couple of years later, it's down to 185. Similar. 2001, it's down to 180. 2003, it's down to 175. Actually, if I took this out a bit further, the lowest we measured was about 165. So over this period of time, there was a tremendous improvement in running economy. She was using much less oxygen to run at the same speeds, or much less oxygen to cover a given distance. So there were biomechanical, possibly, physiological, anthropometrical changes that occurred, training changes also that occurred over that period, that were responsible for these tremendous improvements in muscle efficiency, which may well be responsible for her enhanced performance over that period. When we combine the VO2 max with the running economy, this itself tells a tale. Remember that the VO2 max itself hasn't changed, but the economy has. So in 92, her velocity at VO2 max was around 20.5, but we can see this staircase effect essentially right up to 2003. So as a consequence of the improved economy, the velocity at VO2 max continues to improve throughout this period. Now you can run at your VO2 max for about 3,000 metres. And interestingly, if you take each of these speeds and you calculate what time she would do for 3,000 metres, which is sustained each of those speeds, you get within a few seconds of her personal best for 3,000 metres in each of those years. So that works quite well. But what is also interesting, of course, is that if you run 80% of your VO2 max, so for a given effort, you'll also be travelling much faster if you're more economical. So it doesn't, I'm just illustrating it as VO2 max, but actually your ability to sustain higher speeds will be improved also. So 15% improvement. Here are her blood lactate profiles between 92 and 2003. I mentioned to you that a rightward and downward shift of the lactate curve is what we'd be looking for. 92 data I've already showed you. 94 is in purple. 96 is in yellow. 98 is in green. 2001 is in purple. And then 2003 is in red. So again, we can see this really substantial improvement in the lactate threshold over this period of time. We can illustrate that in a different way. So if we look at the lactate threshold in the purple, it's going up through all of these periods, so that in 2003, on average, it was around 18 kilometres per hour. So it had gone from around 14 in 92 to 18 in 2003. The lactate turn point went from around 16 here to around 20 here. By the way, the lactate threshold speed is a very close approximation of the speed that an athlete can sustain for the marathon distance, and the lactate turn point speed is a very close approximation of the speed that an athlete can sustain over 10,000 metres. Here are the heart rate profiles. Again, dramatic improvements in cardiovascular fitness. Here's 1992, so here's heart rate plotted against running speed. There's 94 in purple, 96, 98 and 2002. Okay. So let's take a running speed of 16 kilometres per hour. You can see that back in 1992, her heart rate was around 190 beats per minute, and by 2002 it was down to 160 beats per minute. So tremendous improvements, presumably in the stroke volume of the heart, and therefore the improvement in maximal cardiac output. So some laboratory testing. I'm going to just show you a quick video clip. This is Paula in 2003. By this time we're up at Manchester Metropolitan University. And this is Paula completing one of her treadmill tests. This is at around 21 or 22 kilometres per hour. So the technology was a bit more sophisticated by then. We were using breath-by-breath gas analysis. You saw my colleague poised there to take a blood sample. She was having heart rate measured throughout as well. And at that time, she was the world's leading marathon runner. As I say, she was going at around 21 or 22 kilometres per hour at the end of that test. She only weighed around 54 kilograms. And to see someone of that build running that fast is a bit frightening. When they're that good, you've got to be very careful with them. Especially one of the things that really struck me about Paula when I first started working with her wasn't just how supreme she was physiologically, but she was by far and remains the person who could push herself the hardest, and she would rather have gone off the back of the treadmill than stopped. So sometimes you just have to say that was enough, and just be very careful with people who are worth that much money. So here's Paula's blood lactate concentration response to that very treadmill test that I just showed you a video clip of. And what we did, because we wanted to really nail down where the lactate threshold was we did 15 kilometres per hour, 16, 17, but then really start to tighten it up. 17 and a half, 18, 18 and a half, and that's where the lactate threshold was, 19 and so on. So lots of stages in there, but what's remarkable is this running speed. 18 and a half kilometres per hour at the lactate threshold. When I sort of give this lecture to students, they don't understand quite how fast 18 and a half kilometres per hour is. It's very close to 5-minute mile pace. And so I challenge them to go on the treadmill and see how long they can last at that speed. Because of course Paula's absolutely cruising. She's not accumulating any lactate at all at 18 and a half kilometres per hour. This is phenomenal. And there's the corresponding heart rate. On the basis of that particular treadmill test, when you calculate what her velocity at VO2 max was, we can predict 3,000 metre time at 8:24. A couple of months later that summer she ran 8:22. There are some prediction equations that you can use, and it's been suggested that you might be able to run at around 97% of your velocity at VO2 max for 5,000 metres. If you do the calculation, you would suggest that she may be able to run about 14:27. She actually ran 14:29 that summer. Her predicted 10,000 metre time from her lactate turn point was 30 minutes and 6 seconds, and she ran 30 minutes and 1 second. And her predicted marathon time from her lactate threshold was 2 hours and 16 minutes. And of course she actually ran that phenomenal 2:15:25 just a couple of weeks after that test was performed. So I think where the physiology was really useful to her was, before that she'd come to the lab and she'd run a test where I predicted that she'd run 2:18, and she did. She came back and she did a test that looked like she could run 2:17. I said, you probably run 2:17, and she did. This suggested she could run 2:16, and she ran 2:15, but it's still pretty close estimate. So it gives athletes a lot of confidence when they go into a race, knowing what they're capable of. It enables them to pace themselves appropriately. These are the most recent results for Paula, recorded in Font-Romeu just a couple of months ago. On that occasion, her lactate threshold was around 17.5 kilometres per hour, which gives you a prediction of around 2:23 or 2:24 for the marathon, which those of you who followed the Berlin Marathon will know wasn't far off what she actually achieved. But she has had a troubled summer, and we were both hoping that she'd be able to go a bit faster than that. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about VO2 kinetics. The VO2 max, running economy, lactate threshold stuff is relatively well known. People have been testing that for a little while. I think the future, I would say this because this is my specialist research area, but is in VO2 kinetics, because the things that we can measure easily in the lab are aerobic parameters of fitness. The anaerobic parameters are much more difficult to measure for a variety of different reasons. But if you're a 1,500 metre runner, let's say, and you're standing on the start line and the gun fires, what's going to be really important to you is how quickly you can turn on your oxidative metabolic system, how quickly you can transport oxygen to your muscles, and how quickly your muscles can utilise the oxygen that they receive. And we're able to measure oxygen uptake on a breath-by-breath basis. Okay? So let's say here they are standing on the start line. There's going to be this square wave increase. As soon as the gun fires, within a split slope, within a few seconds, they're going to be running at, if it's 1,500 metre pace, maybe 105% of their VO2 max. Let's say this is 3,000 metres, right? So it's going to be about 95 or 100% of their VO2 max. The demand goes up instantaneously, and we'll assume that the pace is constant. We can measure oxygen